How does the Christian worldview answer the problem of evil? There are multiple parts to this. I'm going to mention only three. First, this is not the beginning. This is not the beginning. Human history did not start with evil and suffering. Instead, it started in a perfect garden with Adam and Eve. It was supposed to be good. It was supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be sinless. But then sin entered the world. You see how the biblical account gives an origin for human evil and human suffering. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 29, it reads, God created man upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes. It's not God's fault. It's not God's fault. Secondly, we are not alone. We are not alone. I want you to take a look at this video. It's a half-minute video of a little infant.
Oh, no. It's a no, this part. Daddy, don't do that, Daddy. I don't like it, Daddy. I don't like it.
Why is it that we as grown adults find it funny, right, that a kid is crying, right? The kid is crying. I mean, the kid is going to grow up and know that cats are terrible. I mean, I get it. But the kid is crying. And somehow we find it humorous and we smile and it's funny. I think the reason is because we know it's going to be okay. Whatever the kid is experiencing at that time, his emotions and our emotions don't really line up. But we know it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world, even though the kid may think that. And many times when we see kids crying for frivolous, random reasons, we know it's going to be okay. I want to take you back to a very common, familiar verse that we all know about. In John chapter 11, verse 35. It says Jesus wept. And I'm going to set the context for it. A friend of Jesus, Lazarus, died. His two sisters, Martha and Mary, were weeping. So he comes to this little town of Bethany where his friend had died. And it's been 3 days. And he was well and truly dead. And so he comes to the tomb. And if you read the narrative in John chapter 11, you understand that Jesus knew that he was going to die. And Jesus knew that he would raise Lazarus up. But when he comes to the tomb, he sees his friends Martha and Mary cry. And then are these 9 powerful letters which says, Jesus wept. He knew that it would be okay. And yet, Jesus wept. One of the ways that Jesus answers the emotional problem of evil is through his presence. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, it reads, "The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel," which means God with us. On March 14, 2022, newspapers across the world ran a particular story about the Russian war in Ukraine. A woman whose name we don't know went into a maternity hospital to give birth to her child. But when she was there, in spite of the ceasefire that was there, savage Russian forces bombed the maternity hospital. The woman suffered a fractured pelvis and a dislocated hip. And she was taken out on a stretcher by 4 people to another place where doctors could help deliver her baby. And as the doctors were trying to deliver her baby, she recognized that she wanted her baby to live. And so she told the doctors to focus their attention not on her, but on the baby that was to be born. And so they focused the attention on the baby. And when the baby was born, it was stillborn. The baby had already died because of the bomb that just happened. And so after that, they spent 30 minutes in trying to resuscitate the mother, and she did not make it. Kevin D. Williamson, in the National Review, the next day writes these words, and I'm going to read to you 2 paragraphs of what he wrote. "We are all Ukrainians now," says a heading cover over Wall Street Journal. "The sentiment is a humane one, but it is a lie. We are not all Ukrainians. Most of us are far removed from anything like that kind of danger or that kind of suffering. The worst we have felt is higher gasoline prices and more expensive groceries, but it is not the same. It is not easy to be brave. It is not easy to suffer, but how much easier it must be to suffer oneself than to watch one's children suffer, to be cold and hungry, to die, blown to pieces in the womb before taking their first breath. How many Ukrainian mothers and fathers would happily and joyfully give their own lives if it meant that their kids could enjoy a decent dinner and a safe, warm place to sleep? That is, if they could have what my dogs have." Millions, I assume. No, we are not all Ukrainians now. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot truly identify with suffering when we are far removed from suffering. And that is why the account of Jesus is incredible. There is no other religion in which God became a historical human. Jesus became exactly like one of us. In fact, he was so indistinguishable from the men around him that they needed someone to betray him. He took on humanity with its limitations and burdens, hunger, thirst, tiredness, and tears. If his birth was scandalous, his death was shameful. If his life was cruel, his death was excruciating. He was rejected, he was misunderstood, he was abandoned, he was despised. With his life and death, Jesus is the God who is present with us in our suffering. He became one of us to save us, but also to understand us, to feel our pain, and to weep with us, and to be Emmanuel, the God who is with us. This is not the beginning, and we are not alone. And thirdly, this is not the end. The suffering you are going through is not the end. What does the atheistic worldview have to offer in terms of the future? Death for atheism is an annihilation of the soul. And the way it's described is when you blow out a candle. What happens when you blow out a candle? That's the end. It's same for Buddhism as well, where they believe in annihilation of the soul. Once you're dead, that's the end of it. That would be okay if our lives were perfect, right? If we were born in a perfect world with no physical, no mental, no emotional, no psychological problems, with no suffering, no evil whatsoever, then sure, if there was annihilation of the soul and this was it, it's fine, it's okay. But look around us. It's anything but blissful. If life was the end of it, the atheistic view is a bleak view. It is a hopeless view. But the Christian faith has hope for the future because of the resurrection of Christ. And beyond the agony of the cross is the glory of the empty tomb. Beyond the defeat of Friday is the victory of Sunday. And before the suffering of Calvary is the hope of heaven. Evil and suffering are not the end. And in Revelation chapter 21, verse 3-6 it reads, "And I heard the loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' He said to me, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.'" For secular atheism, death is the ultimate end. For the Christian, God is the ultimate end.